Welcome to this scientific lecture on one of cooking's most fascinating paradoxes: why adding milk to Bolognese sauce makes it taste less milky and more meaty. This seems counterintuitive, but the chemistry behind it is remarkable. Let's start with the central mystery. When you add milk to a meat sauce, you might expect it to taste more dairy-like, more creamy, more milky. But the opposite happens. Adding milk paradoxically reduces the dairy flavor and actually deepens the meatiness of the sauce. This transformation happens through several chemical mechanisms. The key lies in two main processes: lactose caramelization and protein interactions with Maillard reaction intermediates. First, let's understand lactose. Lactose is a disaccharide, meaning it's made of two sugar molecules bonded together. The molecular formula for lactose is C12H22O11. It consists of glucose and galactose linked together. Lactose is composed of glucose and galactose connected by a beta-1,4 glycosidic bond. This structure is crucial for understanding what happens during cooking. When you heat lactose above certain temperatures, it undergoes caramelization. This is different from the Maillard reaction. Caramelization of lactose begins around 110 to 120 degrees Celsius. This is about 230 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. The caramelization temperature is 110 to 120 degrees Celsius. So what exactly happens during caramelization? The sugar molecules break down through a series of complex reactions. When lactose is heated, it decomposes into hundreds of new flavor compounds. These include furans, pyrones, and other complex molecules that taste nutty, toasty, and savory rather than sweet or milky. The caramelization products include furans, maltol, isomaltol, and cyclopentanones. These compounds have distinctly non-dairy flavor profiles. Here's the key insight. The sweet milky lactose transforms into savory, complex flavor compounds. The dairy character essentially disappears. Now let's talk about the Maillard reaction. This is perhaps the most important flavor-developing reaction in all of cooking. The Maillard reaction occurs when amino acids from proteins react with reducing sugars. This creates hundreds of new flavor compounds. The first step is amino acid plus sugar forms a Schiff base. This is the initial condensation reaction. The Schiff base rearranges to form an Amidori product through the Amidori rearrangement. The Amidori product then breaks down into hundreds of different flavor compounds, including pyrazines, thiazoles, and furans. Now here's where milk becomes crucial. Milk contains both lactose and proteins, particularly casein and whey proteins. Milk is approximately 3.3% protein by weight. These proteins are rich in amino acids. Meat proteins and milk proteins contain different amino acid profiles. When you combine them, you get a more diverse set of Maillard reaction products. Here's the critical mechanism. Milk proteins, especially casein, can bind and stabilize Maillard reaction intermediates from the meat. Think of the proteins as molecular scaffolds. They hold onto reactive flavor compounds and allow them to undergo further transformations that wouldn't happen otherwise. Let's talk about umami. Umami is the savory taste associated with glutamate and other amino acids. Umami intensity is proportional to the concentration of glutamate plus nucleotides like inosinate and guanylate. So how does milk increase umami? There are several mechanisms at work here. Mechanism 1. Milk contains glutamine, an amino acid. When heated in acidic conditions with tomatoes, glutamine partially converts to glutamate, which is the primary umami compound. Glutamine breaks down to form glutamate plus ammonia. This reaction is accelerated by heat and acidity. Mechanism 2. The long simmering time causes partial hydrolysis of milk proteins, breaking them down into smaller peptides and free amino acids. Mechanism 3. Casein micelles can bind and concentrate flavor compounds, creating local regions of high umami intensity. Let's do some numerical analysis. How much flavor compound formation are we actually talking about? In a typical Bolognese recipe, you might use 500 grams of meat and 250 milliliters of milk. The milk protein content is 250 milliliters times 0.033, which equals 8.25 grams of protein. The lactose content is 250 milliliters times 0.048, which equals 12 grams of lactose. During 2 to 3 hours of simmering at 95 degrees Celsius, A significant fraction of this lactose caramelizes. Approximately 30 to 40% of the lactose undergoes caramelization, producing 3.6 to 4.8 grams of caramel compounds. These caramel compounds break down into hundreds of milligrams of distinct flavor molecules, each contributing to the overall taste profile. There's another important factor we haven't discussed yet: fat emulsification. Milk contains natural emulsifiers, primarily casein proteins and phospholipids. These help stabilize the fat in the sauce. Casein proteins coat fat droplets, preventing them from coalescing. This creates a more stable, homogeneous sauce with better mouthfeel. Better emulsification means that flavor compounds are more evenly distributed and more readily perceived on the palate. Let me give you an analogy. Think of the sauce as an orchestra. Meat alone is like a string section playing solo. It's good, but is missing depth and complexity. Adding milk is like adding brass and woodwind sections. The milk doesn't make the strings louder, but it adds harmonics and overtones that make the whole composition richer. The caramelized lactose adds bass notes, deep and resonant. The Maillard products add mid-range complexity. The result is a fuller, more satisfying flavor profile. Here's another analogy from art. When you mix complementary colors, something interesting happens. When you mix blue and orange, you don't get a brighter blue or a brighter orange. You get a muted brown. The colors neutralize each other's intensity. Similarly, milk neutralizes its own dairy character through chemical transformation. The lactose becomes non-dairy caramel compounds. The proteins become flavor enhancers rather than dairy markers. Now you might ask, if lactose just caramelizes anyway, why not just add regular sugar instead of milk? The answer is, the proteins in milk are essential. They provide amino acids for Maillard reactions and act as emulsifiers. Lactose-free milk has the lactose pre-broken down into glucose and galactose by the enzyme lactase. These monosaccharides caramelize faster than lactose, but produce a different flavor profile. You'd still get caramelization and Maillard reactions, but the result would taste slightly different. Here's a fascinating evolutionary perspective. Why do humans find these flavors so appealing? Maillard and caramel flavors are signals of cooked food. Throughout human evolution, cooking made food safer and more digestible. Umami is a signal for protein-rich food, which was valuable for survival. We're evolutionarily primed to find these flavors appealing because they indicated nutritious, safe food to our ancestors. Let's touch on an advanced topic: the quantum chemistry of taste perception. Taste receptors on your tongue detect molecular shape and charge distribution through quantum mechanical interactions. The umami receptor, called T1R, 1T1R3, specifically binds glutamate through hydrogen bonding and ionic interactions. The shape complementarity between receptor and molecule is ultimately a quantum mechanical phenomenon involving electron orbital overlap. Let me summarize the complete picture of why milk makes Bolognese less milky and more meaty. First, lactose caramelizes into hundreds of non-dairy flavor compounds that taste nutty and savory. Second, milk proteins provide amino acids that enhance Maillard reactions with meat. Third, casein proteins stabilize emulsions and concentrate flavor compounds. Fourth, glutamine in milk converts to glutamate, boosting umami. Fifth, milk buffers pH to optimal levels for flavor development. The practical takeaway is this: trust the traditional recipe. Centuries of Italian cooking wisdom aligns perfectly with modern chemistry. The traditional method works because of fundamental chemical principles. Science explains why it works. Tradition shows how to execute it properly. This is a beautiful example of the marriage between empirical knowledge passed down through generations and theoretical understanding from chemistry. This paradox of milk making meat sauce less milky is a perfect illustration of how cooking is applied chemistry. Cooking transforms ingredients at the molecular level through heat, time, and chemical reactions. Understanding the science doesn't just satisfy curiosity, it actually makes you a better cook because you understand what you're trying to achieve. So the next time you make Bolognese and add that cup of milk, appreciate the remarkable chemistry happening in your pot. You're not just cooking, you're conducting a complex series of chemical transformations that would make any chemist proud.